The Ghost Signal. The Galactic Council's communication center was one of the most secure and advanced facilities in the entire galaxy. It received and analyzed billions of transmissions every day, from distress calls to trade agreements. But today, something different happened. A strange signal appeared on the long-range scanners. It was weak, distorted, and incredibly old. Yet it carried a pattern that made the technicians freeze in shock. It was human. For over 500 years, humanity had been a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy. Once, they had been a rising power, expanding beyond their homeworld, Earth. They were unpredictable, resilient, and terrifying in battle. But then, one day, they vanished. No one knew why. Some believed a war had wiped them out. Others thought they had destroyed themselves. A few whispered that they had left on their own, searching for something beyond the known galaxy. Whatever the truth was, one fact remained. Humanity had not been seen for centuries. And yet here was a signal. A human signal. Is this real? Officer Derek muttered, his 4 reptilian fingers flying over the control panel as he enhanced the transmission. The technician next to him, a feathered avian named Sela, narrowed her glowing yellow eyes. It's real. There's no doubt about it. The pattern matches pre-collapse human frequencies. But she hesitated, her feathers bristling. It's coming from deep space, far beyond the last recorded human colonies. Derek swallowed hard. Should we report this? Sela didn't answer immediately. She knew what this meant. If the signal was real, if it truly came from a surviving human source, then everything the galaxy knew about its own history was wrong. She reached for the emergency communicator. Across the Galactic Council's core world, alarms blared in the towering halls of the High Command. Supreme Strategist Salzor, a massive war-hardened insectoid, reviewed the data with growing unease. The transmission wasn't just a simple distress call. It was a beacon, a message being deliberately sent out into the void. Someone, or something, wanted to be found. What do we know? Salzor's voice was calm, but the officers gathered in the room could sense his tension. General Craik, a cold-blooded reptilian warlord, spoke first. The signal is coming from the void sector, beyond the mapped territories. No known civilization exists there. Salzor's mandibles twitched. And yet, this signal carries human encryption codes. Yes, Craik confirmed. It is old but authentic, but we don't know who is sending it, or why. Silence filled the chamber. The Galactic Council had always feared the return of humanity. Their disappearance had allowed many alien empires to rise. If they came back, no one knew what would happen. Admiral Varys, a pale-skinned, cybernetic humanoid, leaned forward. We cannot ignore this. If humanity has survived, they may be preparing for something. We must send a reconnaissance fleet. Salzor tapped his armored claw on the table. Agreed, but send only one ship. If this is a trap, we cannot risk an entire fleet. The decision was made. The Vanguard, a stealth cruiser equipped with advanced cloaking, was dispatched. Its mission: investigate the source of the signal and confirm whether humanity had truly returned. 3 days later, the Vanguard reached the coordinates. Captain Race Toleran, a veteran of countless space conflicts, sat in the command chair, his crew tense around him. They were in the middle of nowhere, a vast, empty void. No planets, no stations, just darkness. And yet, the signal pulsed like a heartbeat, leading them forward. Deploy probes, Race ordered. Tiny drones shot forward into the darkness. Their sensors scanned, searching for anything unusual. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, Captain, the sensor officer whispered, his voice tight with fear. I think we found something. On the main screen, a massive object emerged from the void. It was enormous, larger than any known battleship, larger than most space stations, and it was human-made. The ship was ancient, its surface covered in scars from battles fought centuries ago. But its power core was active, pulsing with unreadable energy signatures. This shouldn't be possible, Reyes muttered. That's not just any ship. That's awe. Suddenly, the signal changed. The pulsing beacon became a single direct transmission. The crew held their breath as a voice, cold and mechanical, echoed through the bridge. "We see you." A deep silence followed. Then, the giant ship came to life. A low hum vibrated through space as long-dormant thrusters ignited. Lights flickered across the ship's surface. Weapons systems, far more advanced than anything in the current galactic fleets, activated. And then, without warning, the ship turned toward them. "Emergency retreat. Now," Reyes shouted. The Vanguard spun away, engines flaring to full speed. But before they could escape, another transmission cut through their systems. "Humanity has returned." Then, the screen went dark. The Vanguard never returned. The Galactic Council received only one final transmission before the ship was lost. "They are back, and they are watching." Panic spread across the galaxy. Fear gripped the highest rulers. Because now, the question was not if humanity had returned. It was what they had become. The Galactic Council was in chaos. The disappearance of the Vanguard had sent shockwaves through the highest levels of power. A warship equipped with top-tier stealth technology had simply vanished after making contact with an unknown human ship. Every council chamber, every strategic meeting, every secure communication channel was filled with one burning question: what had humanity become? In the core world of the Galactic Council, Supreme Strategist Salzor stood before a holographic projection of the last transmission from the Vanguard. The words still echoed in his mind. "They are back, and they are watching." The transmission had been cut off after that. No distress signals, no battle logs, just silence. It was as if the Vanguard had been erased from existence. Salzor turned to his advisors, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "Tell me, what do we know?" Admiral Varys, the cybernetic humanoid, spoke first. "We confirmed that the signal originated from an unidentified human warship. Its size and power output suggest it is unlike anything in our historical records." General Craik, the cold-blooded reptilian warlord, let out a slow hiss. "Then there is no doubt. Humanity has returned, but they are no longer the same species we once knew." A silence settled over the room. For centuries, alien civilizations had advanced, expanding into what was once human space. They had divided old human colonies among themselves, repurposed their technology, and written history in their own favor. The idea that humanity had been truly gone had made the galaxy feel safe. Now, that illusion was shattered. "The Council demands answers," a deep voice growled. It belonged to Chancellor Orvax, the highest political authority of the Galactic Council. His thick, armored body reflected the dim light of the chamber. "We cannot afford to act blindly. If the humans are back, we need to know their strength and their intentions." Salzor exhaled slowly. "We must assume the worst. If they are hostile." "They are," Craik interrupted. His reptilian eyes were cold. "The Vanguard did not simply disappear by accident." Varys frowned. "We don't know that for sure." Craik's jaw tightened. "Do you really believe they would return after all these centuries and greet us with open arms?" He looked around the chamber. "No, this is not a peaceful return. This is a reclamation." A chill ran through the room. If that was true, then the Galactic Council was facing a threat unlike any before. Chancellor Orvax stood tall. "We will not sit idle. I am ordering a fleet to be mobilized at once. We must locate this human warship and determine what it is capable of." Salzor hesitated. "Chancellor, with all due respect, if we send an aggressive fleet, and this ship is as powerful as we fear." Orvax's deep voice was firm. "I do not intend to provoke war, Supreme Strategist. But we must be ready for one." The Galactic Fleet moved swiftly. Within hours, dozens of warships were deployed to search for the human vessel. Every sensor array, Every scout ship, every stealth probe was activated, scanning the void for any sign of the ghost ship. But what they found instead was something far worse. A distress call, weak and barely functioning, was detected drifting through space. The message contained the Galactic Council's own encryption codes. It came from the Vanguard. Admiral Varys ordered the fleet to converge on the signal's location. When they arrived, what they saw sent a shiver of fear through even the most battle-hardened warriors. The Vanguard was there, floating lifelessly in the void. But it was wrong. Its hull was twisted, torn apart in unnatural ways. No blast marks, no laser burns. It looked like something had taken it apart piece by piece. Yet there were no bodies. No sign of the crew. No sign of a fight. Just an empty shell. Varys clenched her fists, scanned for life signs. A few seconds later, the results came in. 0. No survivors. No bodies. No trace of what had happened. It was as if the Vanguard's crew had simply vanished. Then, BZZZT. A sudden transmission burst through the comms. The sound was warped, almost like a whisper carried through static. Then a voice. Cold. Hollow. You are not prepared. Every ship's systems shut down at once. Engines failed. Weapons powered down. Lights flickered as something unseen reached through the void and took control. A single massive shadow appeared on the edge of their sensors. It was the warship, the human warship. But now its purpose was clear. It was hunting them. Admiral Varys struggled to maintain her composure as the fleet's systems flickered, their once mighty warships reduced to helpless, drifting husks in the face of an unknown force that had effortlessly taken control of them, leaving every officer, every soldier, and every commander trapped in a paralyzing state of uncertainty, unable to act, unable to even comprehend the sheer power that was now toying with them. The human warship, now fully visible on the fleet's long-range scanners, was unlike anything ever recorded in Galactic Council archives. Its design was monolithic, a leviathan of metal and shadow, its surface shimmering with a strange, unnatural energy that pulsed like a living thing, and as it advanced toward them, its presence alone seemed to warp the very fabric of space around it, creating a gravity field so intense that the surrounding ships were beginning to experience unexplained fluctuations in their positioning, their hulls groaning under an unseen force. Zalzor, still within the Council's war room, watched through the live feed as the situation spiraled into absolute chaos, his usually sharp mind struggling to process the sheer impossibility of what was unfolding before him. How could a single ship disable an entire armada without firing a single shot, without launching a single fighter, without even acknowledging their presence beyond that terrifying, cryptic transmission that had already sent chills through every commander in the fleet? Admiral Varys. The Supreme Strategist's voice crackled through the flickering comms, his tone heavy with an urgency he rarely displayed. You must regain control of your fleet. Now. Varys gritted her teeth, slamming her fist against the side of her chair in frustration, watching as her officers frantically worked at their consoles, desperately trying to restart even the most basic of their ship's functions. But it was futile. The power was gone. Communications were failing one by one. And the only thing they could do was sit in absolute silence as the human warship continued its slow, deliberate approach, like a predator savoring the fear of its prey before the kill. Then, without warning, the fleet's systems roared back to life. Engines flared. Lights stabilized. Weapons powered back online. The void was suddenly filled with the sounds of ships reawakening from their forced hibernation. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over the fleet's officers, but it was quickly drowned by a realization far more terrifying. The human warship had given them back control. Not because it was merciful, because it wanted them to run. "This is a message," General Craik murmured, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he leaned closer to the screen in the council chamber, his voice lower than a whisper, but filled with a deep, uneasy understanding. "They are showing us their power without using it, giving us a chance to flee. to spread the word, to tell the entire Galactic Council that humanity has returned, and that they are not merely another empire seeking dominance. He turned to Chancellor Orvax, his scaled fingers gripping the edge of the holographic table as the images of the human warship loomed over them. They are warning us. Varys, now fully in control of her fleet once more, took in a deep breath, her mind racing through possibilities, through strategies, through any course of action that wouldn't end in complete disaster. But the truth was undeniable. And no matter how many battle simulations she ran in her head, the result remained the same. They couldn't win. Not against this. Not against a force that could disable an entire fleet in an instant, then restore it just as easily, as if it was nothing more than a mere demonstration of superiority, a mere taste of what they could do if they truly wished to unleash their full power upon the galaxy. She had to retreat. Swallowing her pride, she activated the fleet-wide comms, her voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of a decision that no galactic admiral had ever made before, a decision that would be recorded in history for generations to come. "This is Admiral Varys to all ships," she began, her fingers tightening around the control panel, her gaze locked onto the colossal, looming warship that continued to hover before them like a silent executioner, waiting for them to make their move. "We are retreating." There was no argument, no hesitation, no defiance, only a quiet, chilling acceptance from her officers as they relayed the order across the fleet, activating their emergency jump drives with an efficiency born not out of discipline, but out of sheer terror. One by one, the Galactic Council's warships vanished into the darkness of space, their engines burning bright as they fled, leaving behind the Vanguard's lifeless husk, leaving behind the human warship, leaving behind the truth they had just discovered. Humanity was no longer an empire to be ignored. Humanity was no longer a species to be dismissed. Humanity was now something else, and they had just made their first move. The Galactic Council's fleet jumped away one by one, their engines burning bright as they escaped the battlefield, leaving behind the wreckage of the once mighty Vanguard, a symbol of their failure, a reminder of their defeat without a single shot being fired. Silence filled the void, a silence heavier than any explosion, more deafening than any battle cry. The human warship remained motionless, its presence a haunting specter over the battlefield, its dark metallic hull reflecting the distant starlight. Admiral Varys, now safely aboard her flagship light years away, collapsed into her chair, exhaustion washing over her. Her crew was still shaken, their voices hushed, their movements slow as if they feared their every action would somehow draw the attention of the unstoppable force they had just encountered. Reports poured in from the surviving ships, damage assessments, tactical analysis, crew debriefings, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the undeniable truth. Humanity had returned, and they were beyond anything the Council had ever prepared for. In the high chambers of the Galactic Council, Chancellor Orvax stood before a gathering of the most powerful leaders in the galaxy. The holographic projection of the human warship loomed over them, frozen in time, captured from the last recorded moments before their fleet had fled. Silence dominated the room as officials, generals, and strategists stared at the image in disbelief, unable to fathom how one single ship had rendered an entire battle fleet powerless. Supreme Strategist Salzor finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of impending doom. "We have always believed that time was our greatest weapon, that the longer a species remained under our rule, the more control we would have over them. We believe humanity was broken. We believe they were forgotten." He turned to the Council, his cold, unblinking gaze filled with an emotion no one had ever seen from him before. "We were wrong." General Craik, his claws clicking against the table, let out a low, rumbling growl. That warship was no mere relic. It was a declaration. They did not need to fight us. They did not need to destroy us. They only needed to show us what they had become. His eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, his voice laced with quiet fury. And now we must ask ourselves, how many more of these ships are out there? Chancellor Orvax turned to his advisors, his hands gripping the sides of the podium as he struggled to keep his voice steady. We must understand what we are dealing with. We must learn everything about this ship, about what humanity has become, about what they are planning. He exhaled slowly before delivering the words that no leader of the Galactic Council had ever spoken before. We must prepare for the return of an empire we tried to erase. Across the distant reaches of space, on the outer rim of an uncharted system, another warship stirred from its slumber. It was not alone. The news of the human warship's return spread like wildfire across the galaxy, igniting fear, confusion, and desperation among the ruling factions of the Galactic Council. The battlefield, once meant to be a show of dominance, had instead become a monument of failure, a chilling reminder that the Council's grip on the galaxy was not as absolute as they had believed. Surveillance probes, hastily deployed to track the ship's movements, returned only silence. The massive warship had disappeared without a trace, vanishing into the void as if it had never existed. But the Council knew better. Humanity was out there, watching, waiting. In the heart of the Council's capital world, where towering spires reached toward the swirling nebulae above, the greatest minds of the galaxy gathered in a desperate attempt to understand what they had witnessed. Engineers, historians, and intelligence officers worked tirelessly, analyzing every recorded frame of the encounter, dissecting the human warship's impossible design, its impenetrable defenses, its unreadable energy signature. But all they uncovered were more questions, more impossibilities, more fears. The ship's structure bore no resemblance to any known engineering principles. Its movement defied standard propulsion mechanics, and the sheer scale of its technological advancements suggested an empire far beyond what the Council had believed possible. While the Council struggled to comprehend the mystery of humanity's return, whispers of the event began to reach the outer colonies, spreading through underground networks, smugglers, and exiled groups who had long suffered under the Council's rule. The name humanity, once spoken in hushed tones as a relic of the past, now surged back into the consciousness of countless alien species. Some feared them as a vengeful force, an ancient enemy resurfaced from the ashes, while others dared to hope, wondering if the legends of humanity's unyielding will and unyielding justice might hold truth. As the Council debated their next course of action, hidden factions within their own ranks began to fracture. Some called for immediate war, for a preemptive strike against any potential human strongholds before they could fully reveal themselves. Others, those who understood the sheer magnitude of the threat, urged for diplomacy, for negotiation, for surrender before it was too late. The most fearful, however, spoke of something far worse than war, the return of the rulers they had once banished. But even as these internal conflicts raged, something else was happening in the darkest corners of space, something far more terrifying than any council meeting, any debate, any fear-driven decision. Unmarked ships began to disappear from trade routes, entire fleets vanished without a trace, distress beacons were never answered. The Council, still blinded by their own struggles, failed to see the pattern, failed to recognize the signs. Humanity had returned, and this time, they weren't just watching. Across the vast, cold expanse of space, where the light of distant stars barely touched the shadows of forgotten worlds, something ancient stirred. The Council, still reeling from the encounter with the human warship, failed to notice the shifts in the undercurrents of galactic power, but those who lived in the lawless fringes of space, pirates, exiles, and scavengers, felt it first. It was a slow, creeping change, a whisper in the darkness, a realization that someone was moving through the void with silent precision, leaving no trace except for the emptiness where fleets had once been. Entire armadas, once believed to be the strongest in the galaxy, had been wiped away without a single distress signal. The Council's intelligence networks struggled to piece together what little evidence they had, but nothing made sense. There were no wreckages, no survivors, no escape pods drifting through space, only an eerie silence that spoke volumes. The outer colonies, long neglected and left to fend for themselves, began to hear rumors, tales of ghosts, of a force moving unseen through the black, striking with unmatched precision, before vanishing just as quickly. The whispers spoke of a fleet unlike any before, ships larger than space stations, their hulls impervious to all known weapons, their engines silent even to the most advanced tracking systems. The rumors grew, spreading from system to system, until even the most powerful warlords in the galaxy felt an unease they had never known before. Within the Council's war chambers, panic had begun to set in. A full-scale investigation into humanity's last recorded movements yielded disturbing results. They had never truly left. The records, long buried and forgotten, painted a picture of something far worse than simple survival. The humans had not been wiped out by war, nor had they faded into history as the Council had once believed. They had withdrawn, and now, it was clear, they had spent centuries preparing for their return. Debates turned to desperate action. Some argued for surrender, others for an immediate galactic-wide mobilization, but the truth was undeniable. No one knew where to strike, or even if striking was an option. The Council's fleets, vast and mighty, suddenly felt small and inadequate, their technology outdated, their ships nothing more than relics compared to what they had seen. It was becoming clear that the very balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and it was no longer in their favor. And then, without warning, the first message came. A transmission, unlike any before, echoed through every secured frequency, reaching not just the Council, but every major power in the galaxy. It was a voice, calm, steady, undeniably human. We have watched. We have waited. We have prepared. Now, we are here. And the galaxy will remember what it means to fear humanity. The transmission ended, leaving behind only silence. But that silence did not last long. Within moments, reports flooded in from every sector. Human ships had arrived, their presence undeniable, their intent unmistakable. The return of humanity was no longer a question, no longer a distant nightmare. It was happening now, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The galaxy held its breath. Across countless worlds, from the towering spires of the Council's core planets to the lawless fringes of deep space, the realization spread like wildfire. Humanity had returned. Their ships, colossal and unstoppable, emerged from the void with a precision that defied logic. Entire fleets of the most advanced warships the galaxy had ever seen moved in absolute silence, their dark hulls absorbing the light of distant stars. The Council's forces scrambled to form a defense, but it was already too late. The first assault was not a battle, it was an execution. Human warships struck with terrifying efficiency, appearing in multiple systems at once, their weapons tearing through the finest chips the Council had to offer as if they were nothing more than scrap. The once mighty dreadnoughts of the galactic core, symbols of the Council's dominance, were reduced to floating wreckage in mere minutes. The Council's admirals, some of the most experienced strategists in known history, found themselves powerless, their battle formations collapsing before they could even react. Humanity's forces were faster, smarter, lethal beyond comprehension. On the Council's homeworld, fear gripped the ruling elite. The Grand Chamber, once a place of political maneuvering and power struggles, became a room of whispered terror. The ancient rulers, who had sat upon their thrones for centuries, suddenly found themselves questioning whether they would live to see another sunrise. The security measures they had trusted for so long felt laughably weak in the face of an enemy that had disappeared for generations only to return as a force of pure devastation. Desperate messages were sent. Surrender. Negotiation. Pleas for mercy. But humanity did not answer. Instead, they continued their advance, their ships moving with a purpose that left no room for doubt. This was not a war for conquest. This was retribution. The outer colonies of the Council fell first, not in brutal invasions, but in silent takeovers. Human forces bypassed planetary defenses, as if they were nothing more than an inconvenience, walking through shields and countermeasures like they did not exist. On some worlds, entire governing bodies simply vanished overnight, replaced by eerie transmissions from unseen voices. Your rule is over. That was the only message left behind. Then came the final blow. The largest fleet ever assembled by the Council, thousands of warships, billions of soldiers, stood as the last line of defense over the core worlds. It was a show of force meant to intimidate, to convince humanity to stop. But the humans never stopped. The battle lasted less than an hour. Council ships, massive in number but hopelessly outmatched, crumbled before the onslaught. Weapons they had never seen before tore through their ranks. Defenses shattered like glass, admirals screaming orders that no longer mattered. And then, at last, the skies over the Council's homeworld darkened. The human flagship, larger than anything ever constructed in known history, descended through the clouds, its shadow swallowing entire cities. The Council leaders, once untouchable, now stood alone, staring at the screens that displayed their doom. Then, a voice echoed through every corner of the planet. The same voice from before. Calm. Unshaken. For centuries, you thought we were gone. For centuries, you ruled unchecked, believing you were the masters of the stars. But now, the silence has ended, and you will never forget humanity again. As the transmission ended, the Council's final stronghold erupted into fire, and the age of human vengeance began.